The Western Conference is honestly the harder conference to predict. There are so many moving pieces. Teams have traded for stars, teams have lost stars to injuries, and young players and organizations are looking to make massive jumps. On opening night, every single team has the intention of making the playoffs. Projected lottery teams are trying to prove the world wrong, while projected playoff teams are trying to achieve the first step towards a championship run. The Western Conference is always a doozy because of how close some of the top teams are from each other. I mean, a few years ago, the San Antonio Spurs dropped from the 3rd seed to the 7th seed after just losing the last game of their regular season. Just goes to show how close the race for seeding is sometimes. These projections are assuming that there are no injuries to major players, as that has greatly affected the standings in the previous years. Obviously that's not realistic, but that's just what we're going off of. Starting off at the top, I actually have a surprise here with the Utah Jazz. After blowing it against the shorthanded Clippers, many people have labeled them as pretenders rather than contenders. Regardless of what happened in the playoffs, I still think they will be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. Unlike some of the other teams, they have almost every single piece coming back, with a few minor additions in Gay, Whiteside, and Pascal. The big reason I think they will retain the number 1 seed is due to their defensive consistency, which allows them to win games with, consistency. I also think that Mitchell will take a step up in terms of regular season production. Last year, their surprise was a success, but this year, it really won't be. At number 2, I got the Lakers. Placing them was the hardest of the bunch because they have the biggest question marks due to their acquisition of Westbrook. Alongside Westbrook, they have completely overturned their roster, which will require them time to gel. How much time? No one really knows, but it is safe to say that they will struggle within the first month or 2 into their schedule, so they can kind of figure it out. Even with all those issues, they have the most talented team in the West, and in some games, their talent alone will completely overwhelm the opposition. Also, they have LeBron fucking James. From here on out, it is so iffy, but I got the Phoenix Suns at number 3. Although they did get blessed by the injury gods in their postseason run, they're still a very damn good team. They were able to retain Cameron Payne, add JaVale McGee, who is awesome and effective, and trade for Landry Shamet, who will provide some much needed shooting off the bench. While losing no one in their main rotation, I expect Ayton, Booker, Bridges, and Johnson to take on much bigger roles in this season, which will allow them to once again be a contender in the West. That being said, I think the Denver Nuggets will take the last spot in the top 4. Although Jamal Murray is out, they still have the reigning MVP and were able to extend both Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. While retaining some core players, they also added Jeff Green, who was a super underrated addition. The growth of both Michael Porter Jr. and Joker, I still think he can get better, will allow them to mitigate the loss of Jamal Murray. At the 5 spot, I got the Golden State Warriors. I still think they are one of the top contenders to win the chip. However, the biggest obstacle to that is the return of Klay Thompson. His return will probably get pushed back towards January and maybe even February, and even when he does return, I highly doubt he'll be playing heavy minutes or playing back-to-backs. His entire regular season will be to get his conditioning and impact ready for the playoffs. Curry will do his heroics, and Draymond will be his usual self. However, the key to their success will be the growth of James Wiseman and Andrew Wiggins, but also the impact from their bench. Otto Porter Jr. and Poole have been looking very nice for the Warriors, and if you pair them up with the rest of their bench, they should honestly have a nice regular season. The 6th seed, in my opinion, will go to the Mavericks. Although they did not have any major star additions like I hope they would, they still retained some core pieces and added shooters to help out Luka. As a result, this team will go as far as Luka will take them. He is currently the favorite for MVP, and rightfully so, as he is one of the few players that will have to carry his team on his own. We are still waiting to see the Kristaps-Luka duo live up to their potential and hype, but maybe this year is that year. So the first play-in spot I think will go to the Blazers. It sucks that the team did not make any major additions or moves to fulfill Dame's wishes, but that does not change the fact that this team has made the playoffs for at least the past 7 years. I do not think that will change, as they will still have one of the more talented rosters, and Chauncey should give them new life and energy. The last spot for the playoff picture will go to the Clippers. Yes, Kawhi is out, yes, he is their best player, and yes, there is no guarantee he'll be back this season. However, this team is still very talented top to bottom. I would not be surprised if Paul George emerges in the MVP race, because this team has very little star talent. But what they do have is depth, and above average role players in Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, and Serge Ibaka. With Kawhi out, this team could very well miss the whole play-in tournament, but I don't think Tyronn Lue will allow that to happen. Now, the first of the 2 play-in spots will be taken by the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're one of the most talented teams in the NBA, with Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Lo, Ant-Man, and a plethora of youngsters who could take massive leaps in this next season. They all have the pieces to be in the playoffs, but whether they can put those pieces together has yet to be seen. Whether it has been COVID or injuries, they have gotten effed. But if they can remain healthy, they can still make an impact. This last spot for the play-in tournament is really tough. The Kings are young, talented, and underrated, but it will come down to the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. Funny enough, they facilitated a trade with each other, essentially swapping draft picks and centers. Honestly, I thought the Pelicans got infinitely better. The addition of Jonas allows Zion to feast in the interior with no obstacles, and Trey Murphy is ready to contribute now and gives them both shooting and defense. On the flip side, Memphis picked up Adams, who will be a solid defender, but also clogs the lanes that Jonas was able to space out. The addition of Zaire is awesome for the long term, but he is still very raw and has ways to go before he lives up to his potential. That being said, I still think the Grizzlies will beat out the Pelicans for the last spot. Not only did their young group gain playoff experience last year, but they will also be a way better defensive team than the Pelicans. Honestly, it was tough, but the decision came down to Zion's recent injury. Similar to the Mavs, this team will go as far as Zion will take them. If he is not there, I'm honestly very worried about the outlook for this season. So those are my predictions. Are they going to be right? Well, of course they're going to be right. No, just kidding. But let me know what y'all think, because I'm sure you have some arguments against my picks, and maybe you would back them too.